All right, you guys, we're going to go ahead and build the little missile ear side that goes here. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So you're going to need this piece. You'll need this little piece here. You will need your little metal gun barrel. You'll need your little shield. And then you will need a 1mm pin vise tiny little drill. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is right here. This is the hole that the metal gun barrel goes into, and you're going to want to open that up and give yourself a little bit of depth with your pin vise. So just a 1mm drill. You can just do that by hand and just open that up. Give yourself 2 or 3 millimeters of depth. Take your time, make it nice and straight. And then your gun barrel will pop in here just like this. You should be able to kind of wiggle that around to get it straight. So the first thing that we're going to do is take our CA glue. We'll put a drop inside that hole. Then I'm going to look at this from the top and just work it to where it's straight. Look at it from the side. Work it until it's straight. And then we can grab a throwaway brush. Clean off any excess glue that got pushed out. And then go back through and just do the same thing. Just give it a little bit of push here and there. And just make sure that everything is nice and straight. And there you go. Next, we're going to put some glue into this open rectangle. And then you're going to take this section with a little fragile bar that goes on top. And this just gets pressed into place here. And then just hold that there for a couple of seconds. If you feel like, I feel like mine might be a little loosey. So let's go ahead and add a little bit more glue. Let's give it more. There we go. So then you've got that. Now then, being careful not to push on that, you've got 2 grooves right here. So we're going to drop some glue into each of these grooves. Just like this. Now our shield is going to face with the angles facing this way. And then you can see that there's 2 pieces of what would be like T-shaped styrene in the back. And those are just going to fit right into the grooves. And then you just line those up to be flush. Just like that. And there you go. Now this whole unit is done, so we can just set this to the side. Go ahead and double check just to make sure everything's nice and straight before you set it over. And this missile part is done. It's got a square axle, and that square axle will just press in here. We're not going to go ahead and do that right now because we're going to wait for everything to dry. If you go ahead and do that with impatience, then you might end up shifting something, so we don't want to do that. Plus, we can go ahead and paint this while it is separated, so that's always a good thing. So we'll set that off with the rest of our modules off to the side, and that is done. All right, so we've let this top part sit for 24 hours to let it fully cure, along with this bottom section. The back still comes off, so we can go ahead and still remove that. This will be glued much later on, even if you might not even need to glue it. I mean, it just pops into place and it's going to sit there. So if you ever have to make any repairs or do anything later on, you might not even want to glue it because it sits nice and flush. If you want it to be like absolutely perfectly square, you might want to glue it. That's up to you. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next couple of parts though. So first and foremost, let's look at what we have left for the body. So we've got two of these guys, and we've got two of these guys. This is their positioning. So we can go ahead and start by grabbing some CA glue, filling up these square peg holes, and getting these positioned. And then we're going to set them off to the side so that they can dry. Next, you've got your two shield pieces that go on the bottom. I'm going to show you where they go. You can see that they go on this, in these two square holes here, and this is going to go on the bottom. I'm not going to install these yet because this is another one of those really fragile parts, very similar to these shield parts on the legs. That's just very easy to get broken while you're painting things and moving things around. So you can go ahead and paint these during the painting process and then put them on last. So we're going to focus on this little pin piece. This goes on the front and this goes on the front. So let's go ahead and start by flipping this guy over. We're going to put him here. If you look at this, these two squares are slightly off center. So you're going to want to look for the portion that is slightly farther forward when looking at it from this view. And then this is just going to tuck up right here and give yourself, don't push it against it, but give yourself just a little bit of a gap. And that is exactly where it goes. And then you're just going to make sure that that's nice. Those squares are nice and parallel. So we can go ahead and go back to our clear grip. And if you've let that sat, just squirt off some of the excess. We're just going to get this guy into place. And there it is. Don't forget, if you have any that squeeze outwards, once it is fully cured, it's going to be slightly rubbery, and you can go back in with an X-Acto knife and you can clean up all of your edges without too much issue. It'll be like rubber band. So that's the only difficulty, is just pulling it off, but you can cut it and you can scrape it off the metal surface, but it still creates a very strong bond, which is really nice. So that's in place. Let's go ahead and rotate ourselves upwards. So I'm going to use these to hold us in position. So let's start with this guy. Now this guy has a larger circle and a smaller circle. The larger circle faces up, and then it is going to be placed on this side, and it is slightly more to the outside than it is to the inside, and centered. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the outside of the background circle with the rim. So if you look at it from this view, this circle here, I'm going to line up with this ridge. There you go. Now this guy, he's going to go on the front here. And if we look at it from a profile, it does overlap. So what we're going to do is we're going to place glue up to this line on the back, and then use this line as our guide on how to glue this. So we can go ahead and just place glue directly here. Take our brush, move it around. You can choose to glue only one side. You can choose to glue both sides. Because the glue is slightly flexible, I'm not as concerned about only gluing one side so that you can loosen and tighten your screws for your neck, because the glue actually is going to have that 1/4 millimeter or 1/2 millimeter flexibility. So that's not a big concern. So now we're just going to press this guy, and then you can look at it from the bottom to center it, and then up, and then center it again. There we go. Okay. So now that's squared away. Now going back to these guys. So this hinged portion faces upwards. So this one's going to go on this side. This one's going to go on this side. And if we look at it from an angle, you're going to line up this back hinge with this second piston, and then you're just going to flush the bottom. And that's all you've got to do to mount it. Very simple. So let's go ahead and lean these guys back out of the way. Oop, lost something. So if you have any issues with this stuff falling off, I'm moving a little bit faster than I normally would if I was just doing this on my own. So if you want to take a break and let these dry, go ahead and do that. Or if you need to clamp anything down, use some rubber bands or use some spring clamps, go ahead and do that. All right, so we are in position, but because this glue is movable, for the sake of making sure that this piece stays exactly where we want it to go, there's not really any space to clamp this. So you're going to want to wait before you put this one on. So you probably only have to wait about 10 minutes, but you're going to want to wait until this one sets before doing anything. Because if it shifts while you're putting the other one on, then you will probably be very unhappy. You can remove it with an X-Acto knife and then clean off that glue and then do it again, but nobody wants to do that. So get yourself exactly where you want it. And then we're just going to wait 10 minutes and then we'll come back to it. Okay. So this guy has dried for over the 24-hour period. So we're going to go ahead and do the opposite sides of both legs now. We went ahead and put on the symmetrical opposite side section. So that's done. So now we have the on-camera side for the right leg, and we have the one piece that goes on the off-camera side for the other leg, which is this little guy. So let's start with that little guy, because then we can move this one off. We can call this done. So this guy just goes symmetrically right about there. So let's go ahead and grab some of our Gorilla Clear Grip. We'll get that on the back. Then I'm going to press that back and forth a little bit. And then we just look at this. Just get it into position. Just like that. So now we can set that guy off to the side. Now moving on to this one, we will go ahead and start with this big guy. You've got a big hole here, and that goes over your pin. And then that sits here and lines up. You can see that there's a section that's going to sit right on top. So let's go ahead and get some glue here. And you can use your throwaway brush to move it around and get it nice and evenish. Then we'll place that into position. And then we're going to grab clip. There you go. So that part's done. We can go ahead and do the same thing that we did on the other side. So we'll go ahead and place, turn that around. We'll place this guy. Just like that. And then just kind of following some of the same stuff that we did before. We've got this piece. Then we've got our number 22. And remember that you're going to want the little point to sit flush with the very edge of where the screw is. And again, don't worry if you have any glue that sticks out, because the glue turns into a rubbery glue. And then, like, I've got a little bit of glue that's sticking out right here. I can remove that with an X-Acto knife really easily afterwards. Then we've got our little cap. And that's going to go right over this. And we grab a foot. We can pop that in place. And that tells us how much room we've got here. So there you go. So all these things are still pretty loose. So I'm going to go back in and clamp everything with clamps. The only thing that's left are the shield pieces, and I am not going to glue those in because this part here is pretty fragile, and you don't want to go in and bump these when you're painting. So what I'm going to do is I'll glue these in last. But if you're going to do any gluing, the large portion here, because this is mounted asymmetrically, so the large portion faces down, and then it just gets glued here right above the crack. So that's where it goes. So just so you know where it goes, but we'll deal with that later. So I'm going to clamp these off camera and let them dry for another 24 hours. Make sure everything's nicely positioned, trim off the glue, and then we'll move on to the next step. In this portion of the video, we're going to go over the setup process for getting your ESB attached to the base that was included in your kit. So I have gone and posed the basic setup of how we're going to pose our ESB on our stand. And there's a variety of ways that you can do this. So one of the most simple ways to do this would be just rotating this and have it 90 degrees. And that would be similar to how you would see this in the Chronicles book, or a lot of how you would see this in any of the black and white images of the original model. However, to show off the most of the details in a display where your base is sitting square on your shelf, I feel like rotating the model 45 degrees is going to give you that best angle of on camera, off camera. So that's why we're setting this up at 45 degrees. Plus, I feel like in our particular model, we're going to set this up in a more dynamic pose, similar to how I set up the smaller version that's going to be coming out soon, where this leg is actually posed up, similar to one of the shots that you can see in the film. So we're going to attach this off-camera leg to the ground. That way this leg can be perfectly free. So all I did was take this front screw hole and centered that on these two opposing corners. And then I just measured 100 millimeters from the outside of the foot to the corner, and from the outside of the foot to the corner. So super simple. And it should be within a millimeter of matching that especially if you pull the legs apart or push them together. So once you have that in position, then you have some options. You can take a pen and you can put that pen inside the hole to mark it. What I went ahead and did is we still have our pin vise from drilling out our little missile barrel, and I went ahead and just dropped that pin vise in here and then just started a very small hole to mark where my drill is eventually going to puncture through here. Now we can take this off and we'll set that to the side, and then we can wipe this off. This has a satin finish, so it may pick up oils on your fingers. You can use gloves or just use a non-ammonia based cleaner, nothing with a solvent on it, and you can remove those fingerprints later. So don't worry about it. Now we're going to take some tape. The tape is very important for a clean hole so that you don't mar your base. We're just going to take the tape, put that over where the hole is going to be, and then I am just going to punch. I can see where the hole is. I'm just going to punch right where that hole is. Right there. Now I know where my hole is. Next, we need the screws. So the screw that fits into the feet is a 1024 screw. The base is 1.5 inches tall, and you want to make sure that it's going to go into the foot just a little bit. So just get 1.5 inch 1024 screws if you're not going to be using any type of diorama style base addition that's going to sit on top of this base here. So this is just a round head with a Phillips top, 1.5 inch 1024. Now we're going to grab our drill bits and we're just going to size up what we feel like is going to be a good size. 1364s looks like a good size. You want it to be just a little bit bigger than your screw so that everything slides in easy. You could go down to 3/16, but I feel like that might be just a little tight. So I'm going one size up. So now you've got your drill. Now you don't want to drill into your table surface. So we've got a lot of foam lying around. You can take some of the foam from the box, or you can take the lid from the box, or you can take a piece of wood from your garage if you have any scrap wood, anything that you want to, and just put that underneath the base to act as a buffer in between the base and the surface of your table. Now I'm just going to stand up here and then center, and now we're just going to drill straight through. So we've chipped a little bit of this out. If you went a little bit slower, you probably would not chip as much, but that's okay because we have a washer that we need to make a large hole for in the back, and the washer plus the head of the screw need to sit past flush, and that's what's going to give us the ability for this to sink in past the 1.5 mark and have part of the threading stick up through the hole. So what we need to do is measure the distance and thickness of the washer plus the head. So let's go ahead and measure that. And that is 5 millimeters. So then we're going to take our large drill bit, and I'm going to be using a 1/2 inch drill bit for this. And then we're going to grab a piece of tape. And sorry, this is going to be off camera, but all I'm going to do is put that tape at the 5 millimeter mark. I'll show you what it looks like here in a sec. So this is just the simple way to do it. So we just drop some tape to show us 5 millimeters. And then we'll grab our drill again. Drop it in here. And then we're just going to go nice and slow and easy. Just like that. Okay. Get out any loose wood particles. And now we grab our screw. Looks like the 1/2 inch is exactly the same size as the washer. So we're gonna, what's called wallow this a little bit. Where we're just going to spin this around in circles a little bit. If you have metric drill bits, then you can probably get one that's just a little bit bigger than 1.5 or than 1/2 inch. Since I don't have one sitting with me, there we go. So just wallowing it made it fit. And now you can see we've got just a little bit of screw showing. So the next step, actually, I'm going to go ahead and leave this tape on here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this base as my painting stand for doing some detailing. So I'm going to go ahead and cover the top of the base with tape, and I'll cover the side of the base later on. If you have any really cheap, like 2-inch masking tape, that'll make this process a lot less expensive. This frog tape is probably not the best choice as far as expense goes. However, it does leave the least amount of residue. If you were talking about leaving no glue or anything like that on there, like tape marks. So you can choose whatever you want. Now, all we've got to do is grab a nice Phillips head bit, or a Phillips head hand screwdriver would be even better, but I've got a bit handy. And it can just be hand tightened, so no worries there. And now let's grab our ESB. Oop. And then our little fiddly bit here is going to be attaching it to the base. So let's get ourselves recentered. Okay. You just got to be careful if you've got a wife, girlfriend, partner. could be helpful. I'll Justin help with this. So now it is completely mounted. So you can go back through, you can tighten and loosen some screws, get it posed however you want to, but you're going to probably bring it back to somewhat neutral of a pose for painting. And painting is going to be the next set of videos. So right now what we're left with is we've still got our separate feet pieces. So those are not attached, and we're going to leave those unattached for now. We've got our cannon. We've got our shields, both the underside and the front shields. And then we've got our side missile turret. So I'm leaving all of those as separate modules for now until we get our basic paint and weathering put on. Then once we are ready to do final weathering, we'll get all those installed first so that we can do our blending. This just makes the process easier. Also, the head is still completely detachable, and you can even remove the bottom piece. And all of that doesn't necessarily even have to be officially glued. This just makes things a lot easier for installation. And then, of course, you still have your neck, which if your neck is still clear, just a reminder that you can use leather dye and do one single dip in leather dye, black leather dye, and it will come out perfectly black, no residue, no streaking. Looks absolutely perfect. And we're still working on getting all of those re-delivered so that you'll get a new black one anyway. But that's it for the basic setup. The next set of series will be getting this beautiful model painted, and we look very much forward to getting this ready so that you guys have beautiful models on your shelves. Thanks. Bye.